When the Army needs to punch through something, 1st Armored Division is the fist. Built around Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, and a massive sustainment infrastructure, Old Ironsides is the Army's armored shock formation. Their doctrine is simple in concept but brutal in execution. Break through enemy defenses, exploit the gap, and keep driving before the other side can recover and reorganize. That approach was on full display in Desert Storm, where 1st Armored led 7th Corps' flanking attack deep into Iraq. The Iraqi forces, which were considered battle-hardened from their war with Iran, were shattered in a matter of days, not weeks, days. The combination of speed, firepower, and coordination overwhelmed their ability to react. What often gets overlooked is how Old Ironsides handled what came after the shooting. When Baghdad turned into an urban insurgency in 2003 and 2004, 1st Armored didn't rotate home. They took over the city and ran a complex task force that mixed tank raids with civil reconstruction and governance support. Nobody expected heavy armor to be effective in that kind of fight. The division proved otherwise. Today, training has shifted toward large-scale conventional warfare again, breaching obstacle belts, surviving massed artillery, and operating under contested air and cyber conditions. The division is preparing to fight an adversary that actually shoots back at scale. Speed as a weapon. That's the clearest way to describe the 3rd Infantry Division's identity in the modern era. Where 1st Armored is built for sustained heavy combat, 3rd Infantry is the formation you send when you need to shatter an enemy's will before they have time to respond. Their signature moment came during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, when armored columns drove directly into Baghdad at high speed during what became known as the Thunder Runs. These weren't clearing operations. They were shock runs designed to demonstrate that Iraqi defenders couldn't stop American armor anywhere, including the capital. The psychological effect was as important as the physical damage. The regime collapsed shortly after. The Thunder Runs became required study in military education programs worldwide. But those same operations exposed a critical vulnerability. Push armored columns too fast, and you can outrun your own fuel and ammunition supply. Tanks that run dry in enemy territory are expensive stationary targets. That lesson stuck. 3rd Infantry planners spent years after Iraq refining how to sustain a high-speed armored spearhead, pre-positioning supplies forward, building logistics nodes that could move with the advance, and rehearsing rapid repairs under fire. The lesson wasn't just how to attack aggressively, it was how to keep that aggression fed and fueled deep inside enemy-held ground, where no friendly supply line yet exists. 18 hours, that's the standard. From the moment the 82nd Airborne Division gets the call, they can have troops loaded onto aircraft and heading anywhere in the world within 18 hours. Some companies have hit 8. You're still deciding what to eat for lunch, and these soldiers are already over the ocean. The 82nd is the Army's immediate response force, and their core mission is called Joint Forcible Entry, parachuting directly into a hostile or uncertain environment to seize an airfield or landing zone so heavier forces can follow behind them. They're not trying to win a prolonged war alone. The mission is to arrive fast enough to deny an enemy a quick, unopposed victory. This matters enormously in the current strategic environment. Adversaries who might be tempted to grab territory quickly before the US can respond have to factor the 82nd into that math. Because the 82nd doesn't need a port, doesn't need a friendly airfield, doesn't need roads. They drop in and build the lodgement themselves. Living under that readiness standard is genuinely demanding. Paratroopers manage leave, medical appointments, and personal schedules around the 18-hour clock every single day. Division-wide exercises regularly stress test the entire deployment pipeline from alert notification to aircraft loaded and wheels up, making sure the machine stays sharp regardless of how long it's been since the last real-world call-out. The 101st Airborne Division still carries the airborne name in its title, but functionally it operates as something different. The Army's premier air assault division. Instead of parachutes, their infantry loads onto UH-60 Blackhawks and CH-47 Chinooks and flies past frontline defenses entirely to land deep in enemy territory. No fighting through the front door. Show up behind it and let the enemy figure out what just happened. In a peer conflict, that translates into landing battalions behind an enemy brigade to cut off supply lines and destroy command nodes before the forward units even realize American troops are in their rear. The timing of these operations requires precise synchronization with artillery, electronic warfare, and sometimes cyber strikes to keep the enemy distracted and suppressed as helicopters arrive over landing zones. During the Iraq War, the 101st used large-scale air assaults early on to rapidly seize objectives, then shifted to smaller precision insertions for raids and partner force support as the conflict evolved. That range, from mass assault to surgical strike, reflects how versatile helicopter-centric warfare actually is when it's executed well. The division's Combat Aviation Brigade is integral to everything they do, providing lift, attack capability, and medical evacuation, often operating simultaneously in the same airspace. Pilots train for night vision goggle operations, brownout landings in desert terrain, and approaches into mountainous environments where a single miscalculation ends the mission permanently. If any division in the Army is living in the future right now, it's 4th Infantry Division out of Fort Carson, Colorado. They earned the label of the Army's first digital division back in the early 2000s when they became the first formation to field battlefield awareness systems that showed commanders a real-time digital picture of where every vehicle and soldier was located. At the time, that capability was genuinely revolutionary. 2 decades later, they're pushing even further ahead. The division is the Army's primary testing ground for next-generation command post infrastructure. Specifically, replacing massive static headquarters buildings with smaller, more mobile command nodes that can relocate quickly and don't present an obvious high-value target for enemy long-range missiles. On the ground level, 4ID runs an actual drone innovation platoon that designs, customizes, and manufactures small unmanned aerial systems in the field. When a specific mission requires a payload that doesn't exist off the shelf, or when a part breaks in a remote location, the platoon uses 3D printers to produce solutions without waiting for a supply chain to respond. That kind of field-level manufacturing capability didn't exist in any meaningful way a decade ago. The broader culture the division is building, one that embraces experimentation, tolerates failure during testing, and rapidly adopts new tools, that is increasingly being watched by the rest of the Army as a template for how large formations should adapt to a battlefield being reshaped by technology. The 25th Infantry Division's nickname, Tropic Lightning, goes back to Guadalcanal and the Philippines. The division's entire modern purpose is built on that Pacific legacy, preparing to fight across the Indo-Pacific theater in environments that most Army formations aren't remotely trained for. Dense jungle, coastal terrain, extreme humidity, and island geography define their world. Headquartered in Hawaii, the division runs the Jungle Operations Training Course, which carries a specific Army mandate to develop and spread jungle warfare expertise across the entire force. Soldiers learn waterborne movement, land navigation without satellite assistance, weapon maintenance in corrosive, humid environments, and small unit tactics in terrain where visibility drops to a few meters, and radio signals bounce unpredictably off dense vegetation. The tactical emphasis is on squad-level independence. In jungle environments, platoons and companies often can't see each other, can't maintain reliable communication, and can't count on vehicle support. Leaders at the lowest levels have to make consequential decisions without waiting for direction from above. That's a fundamentally different leadership demand than what you find in open-terrain mechanized warfare. Equipment fielded to 25th soldiers is specifically tailored for the environment. Lightweight and quick-drying uniforms, anti-corrosion treatments for weapons, and load carriage systems balanced for mobility and heat rather than protection against cold. The division also works directly with acquisition programs to test and refine gear before it gets pushed out Army-wide. No other division in the Army wakes up every single morning, closer to actual war than the 2nd Infantry Division. Permanently headquartered at Camp Humphreys in South Korea, 2ID is the only U.S. Army division stationed overseas full-time, sitting across the border from a nuclear-armed adversary with one of the largest artillery forces on the planet. The fight-tonight mentality isn't a slogan here, it's a literal operational condition. Units are positioned and trained to respond within minutes to provocations along the DMZ. Artillery barrages, infiltration attempts, or larger offensive movements. Planning assumptions don't involve weeks of warning. They involve hours, sometimes less. What makes 2ID structurally unlike anything else in the force is its binational character. The division functions as a combined US-South Korean formation, with Korean brigades integrated under unified command. That level of interoperability isn't built during occasional joint exercises. It's developed through daily routine, shared planning, and years of working inside the same headquarters. The terrain on the Korean peninsula adds another layer of complexity. Mountains, urban sprawl, and limited maneuver corridors force tight integration of armor, infantry, artillery, and aviation in spaces where there's no room to spread out. Compounding that is the very real threat of massed artillery and chemical weapons use, both of which factor directly into how the division hardens its command infrastructure and plans casualty management from day one of any conflict. The 10th Mountain Division was born in World War II to fight in the Italian Alps on skis. Today, that cold weather foundation supports a division that has become one of the most frequently deployed light infantry formations in the entire Army. Not primarily for cold weather missions, but because light infantry that can operate in harsh terrain translates directly to austere, road-poor environments anywhere in the world. Fort Drum in upstate New York isn't an accident. The brutal winters there are a built-in training resource that keeps cold weather proficiency alive year-round without manufacturing artificial conditions. The division feeds instructors and doctrine writers to the Army Mountain Warfare School, ensuring lessons developed over decades of hard experience get preserved and passed on across the force. Afghanistan defined the division's post-9/11 identity. Units from 10th Mountain fought repeatedly in high-altitude terrain, where vehicle access was minimal, where helicopter resupply was the difference between mission success and being cut off, and where foot patrols lasted days through conditions that degraded equipment and bodies simultaneously. The division leaned on small unit tactics, mountain mobility, and a cultural willingness to operate with minimal resources that traces directly back to their WWII roots. That repeated deployment cycle created something valuable. A staff and command structure experienced at managing personnel rotations, preventing capability burnout, and sustaining operational effectiveness over years rather than just months. The Army reactivated the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska in June 2022 for a straightforward reason. The Arctic was becoming a contested domain, and the US didn't have a division-level formation dedicated to owning it. Russia has been investing heavily in Arctic infrastructure and military capability for years. China has declared itself a near-Arctic nation. Alaska sits miles from Russian territory and serves as the geographic bridge between the Pacific and the polar route to Scandinavia. The division consolidated Army Alaska headquarters and 2 existing brigades under the Arctic Angels banner, then immediately began converting from a striker-equipped formation to light infantry specifically to improve cold weather mobility and air transportability into remote locations. Heavy-wheeled vehicles and deep snow don't mix well. Light infantry and snowshoes do. Recent exercises have demonstrated what Arctic combat integration actually looks like at scale. HIMARS rocket systems delivering long-range fires, while Air Force F-35s provide sensor coverage across vast featureless terrain, where conventional observation is nearly impossible. Canadian airlift assets have been folded into exercises as well, building the multinational framework the division will actually need in any real Arctic contingency. Soldiers in the 11th are genuinely on the leading edge of figuring things out that nobody has fully solved. Over snow vehicle concepts, cold weather logistics for sustained operations, and how to maintain communications and targeting accuracy in environments that degrade electronics as aggressively as jungle humidity does, just through a completely different mechanism. Every division needs eyes that move ahead of the main body. That's what the 3rd Cavalry Regiment exists to provide. Known as Brave Rifles, this independent regiment serves as the Army's dedicated reconnaissance and screening force, operating ahead of divisions and corps to find the enemy, identify their positions and strengths, and shape the conditions so bigger formations can commit at the right time and place. Cavalry doesn't just observe. When the mission requires it, they fight for information, using armored vehicles, infantry, and sensors in combined arms teams that can transition from stealthy surveillance to direct engagement without stopping to reorganize. If an enemy patrol needs to be pushed off a ridge to see what's behind it, cavalry makes that call and executes it without waiting for a division headquarters to weigh in. In large-scale combat against a near-peer adversary, that function becomes critical. Modern divisions are expected to control fronts stretching over 100 kilometers. Without dedicated reconnaissance forces screening the flanks and probing the enemy's forward positions, a division is essentially operating blind in a massive battle space where being surprised means taking catastrophic losses. The cavalry culture itself is built around initiative and independent judgment. Scouts regularly operate with limited oversight in high uncertainty environments where decisions have to be made on incomplete information at speed. That mindset, comfortable with ambiguity, biased toward action, is exactly what a modern division needs, reaching out ahead of it before the real fight begins. Longevity means something in the Army. The 1st Infantry Division is one of the oldest and most continuously deployed divisions in the entire force, and their modern identity is built entirely around that capacity for endurance. Where other divisions specialize in shock, speed, or technology, the Big Red One specializes in staying power. The ability to sustain complex ground operations not for weeks, but for years without losing effectiveness. That reputation was earned through back-to-back tours across Iraq and Afghanistan, where the division's brigades managed sprawling territories, ran advisory programs with local security forces, and held together counterinsurgency campaigns that required patience as much as firepower. The staff developed a specific skill set around long rotation personnel management, knowing how to cycle out burned-out intelligence cells, rotate route clearance teams before fatigue turned into casualties, and keep partnered units functional across multiple command transitions. Combined arms integration runs deep here. The division regularly mixes armor, mechanized infantry, artillery, engineers, and aviation into persistent layered teams, comfortable operating in both urban and rural terrains simultaneously. That's not a simple coordination problem, and the Big Red One has refined it across enough real deployments to make it look routine. Today, 1st Infantry carries rotational missions in Europe, integrating with multinational battle groups and National Guard brigades under a unified long-term framework. For NATO allies who need consistent U.S. presence rather than periodic surges, the Big Red One is exactly the right division for the job. Not every division's value is measured in combat deployments or battlefield headlines. The 7th Infantry Division at Joint Base Lewis McChord operates primarily as a headquarters formation, managing, training, and generating readiness across subordinate brigades rather than deploying as a standalone fighting division with its own organic brigade combat teams. That mission is less glamorous but genuinely critical. The division's staff runs the training management infrastructure that ensures the brigades underneath it are actually ready to go somewhere when the Army needs them. That means integrating new doctrine as it comes down, tracking modernization initiatives across units, and absorbing lessons from recent deployments before bad habits calcify into standard practice. The Pacific Northwest location isn't arbitrary. JBLM sits geographically positioned to feed forces toward the Indo-Pacific theater, and the division supports the rotation of units towards 25th Infantry Division and other Pacific-aligned commands. The joint base structure also puts 7th ID in daily proximity to significant Air Force assets, building habitual joint exposure that pays dividends when combined operations actually get executed. What makes 7th ID particularly interesting as a staff assignment is the breadth of visibility it offers. Officers managing readiness and training across multiple brigades simultaneously develop a force generation perspective that single brigade commands simply don't provide. In a major conflict, that headquarters structure can pivot, taking command of attached brigades and enablers to become a fully deployed fighting division practically overnight, making it one of the Army's most flexible swing assets.